Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today, and this one's all about, well, explainable AI, or XAI as the cool kids call it.
Ah, yes, XAI.
We're seeing AI it feels like everywhere these days, but how do we know, right? How do we actually know that it's working fairly, transparently? That's where this idea of explainable AI, XAI, comes in. And for this deep dive, we're using a really interesting essay, actually. It's called Methodologies for Explainable AI in Machine Learning by Jörg-Owe.
Okay, yeah, I've read Schneppat's work. Really insightful stuff.
Yeah, he really breaks it down. So I guess our mission, if you will, for this deep dive is to really try to understand, first of all, explainable AI? What are the key methodologies that Schneppat talks about? And, where is this all going? What are the real world applications? What are the challenges?
Oh, good questions. It's a fascinating field, really.
Definitely. So maybe let's start with the most basic question, right? What is explainable AI?
Well, Schneppat defines it pretty clearly. It's essentially about making sure we can understand how AI systems are making decisions. We want to make sure that the AI is, transparent, accountable, especially in areas like healthcare or finance where the stakes are high.
Right. Where it really, really matters. It's not just about knowing that the AI works, right? It's about knowing how it works. And like you said, being able to trust it.
Yeah.
And Schneppat talks about this evolution of XAI.
Right.
Like it's kind of grown up alongside AI as AI has gotten more complex.
Yeah, exactly. He points out that in the early days of AI, the focus was on creating models that were inherently interpretable, simple enough that you could understand how they worked just by looking at them. But as AI has gotten more complex, as these models have gotten, more sophisticated, that's become much, much harder to do. So now the focus is on explaining these more complex systems after the fact.
So it's almost like there was this debate, right? Like, should we focus on making AI simple enough that we can just inherently understand it? Or is it okay to have this really, really complex AI as long as we can explain it afterwards? And does Schneppat take a side in that debate?
He does. He basically says we need both. There are going to be some cases where you need AI models that are transparent from the start, right? Where it's just absolutely crucial to understand the inner workings. But there are also going to be cases where it's okay to have a more complex model as long as we have the tools to explain it afterward.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So how do we actually go about explaining these complex AI systems? Are there different approaches?
Yeah, there are a bunch of different approaches. And Schneppat actually, he breaks them down into two main categories, right? Model-specific techniques, and then there are model-agnostic techniques.
Okay, so model-specific, model-agnostic, what's the difference?
So model-specific techniques are basically designed for explaining a particular type of AI algorithm. So, if you're working with a decision tree model, there might be specific techniques for explaining how that particular type of model works. Whereas model agnostic techniques, those can be applied to any type of AI model.
Okay, give me an example. I'm starting to get a little lost here.
Okay, so let's say you have an AI model that's predicting, let's say it's predicting whether someone's likely to default on a loan, right?
Right.
A model-specific technique might look at the specific structure of that model. So, how is it weighting different factors? How much weight is it giving to someone's income or their credit history, that kind of thing.
So it's looking under the hood of that specific AI model.
Right, exactly. Now, a model-agnostic method, like LIME, for example, that stands for Local Interpretable Model-Agnostic Explanations. That's a mouthful. But LIME would work differently. It would actually create a simplified model around a specific loan applicant's data. So it's saying, okay, for this particular person, what are the factors that are driving the AI's prediction?
So it's kind of like zooming in on that one particular case and trying to reverse engineer the logic behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And Schneppat, he also talks about another model agnostic method called SHAP, which stands for Shapley Additive Explanations. And that one calculates how much each factor contributed to the overall prediction. So it's kind of like, if you're trying to figure out which players contributed the most to a team's victory.
Okay, so we're bringing game theory now.
A little bit, yeah.
It sounds like there's some really clever tools out there for understanding what's going on inside these AI systems. But I think before we go too deep into the technical weeds here, maybe we should shift gears a little bit and talk about how is XAI actually being used in the real world? Because Schneppat gives some really cool examples.
Yeah, he does. And I think, one of the most exciting areas is healthcare, right? Imagine if you have an AI that can help diagnose diseases or, predict patient outcomes. But the doctors, they can actually understand the reasoning behind those predictions.
Yeah, that would be huge. So it's not just about the AI making the decisions. It's about giving doctors the insights they need to feel confident using AI in their practice.
Exactly. And Schneepat, he even cites some pretty impressive stats about the potential economic impact of AI in healthcare. Like, some estimates suggest that AI could save the U.S. healthcare system up to like $150 billion annually by 2026.
Wow. Those are big numbers. It sounds like XAI is playing a really, really crucial role in like unlocking the full potential of AI in healthcare.
Yeah.
It's not just healthcare, right? Schneepat mentioned some other industries that are kind of embracing XAI as well.
Yeah, finance is a big one. I mean, AI is already being used for things like credit risk assessment, fraud detection, algorithmic trading.
Right, and those are high stakes. Those are really important areas where you really, really need transparency and accountability.
Exactly. And XAI methods can kind of shed light on those decisions, right? Like explain why a credit score was calculated a certain way, or why a transaction was flagged as suspicious.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about the whole, AI-driven financial system thing.
Yeah.
It's good to know there are mechanisms in place to try to ensure fairness and transparency. But what about areas like criminal justice? Is XAI relevant there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Schneepat, he actually argues that XAI is particularly important in criminal justice, especially when it comes to, risk assessments for things like parole or bail. I mean, these are decisions that have a huge impact on people's lives, so we need to be sure that they're being made fairly and without bias.
Well, makes total sense. I mean, if we're going to have an AI that's, helping to make decisions that could potentially impact someone's freedom, we really, really need to be able to understand and scrutinize its reasoning. So this has been a really fascinating look at how XAI is being applied, in these different fields. But I know there are also challenges and limitations to consider. Maybe we can dive into those next.
Yeah, definitely. It's not all sunshine and roses. There are some hurdles to overcome.
Yeah.
It's still early days for XAI,
So what are some of the biggest hurdles right now? What's holding XAI back?
Well, Schneepat, he talks about this need for better user centricity.
User centricity.
Yeah, he argues that a lot of the focus in XAI has been on the technical side, debugging AI systems and making sure they're working properly. But he says we need to shift our focus to the needs of the people who are actually using these systems.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in the technical details and forget about the human element.
Exactly. And so what that means is we need to provide explanations that are tailored to the specific needs of the user. Right? Like a doctor needs a different kind of explanation than a judge or a loan applicant.
Right. It's all about context.
Exactly. And Schneepat also points out, this need to communicate uncertainty effectively. I mean, AI models don't always have all the answers, right?
Right.
And we need to be transparent about that. Users need to understand the limitations of AI and be able to interpret the results appropriately.
Okay. Speaking of limitations, Schneepat also mentions this trade-off between fairness and accuracy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So sometimes making an AI model more fair might actually slightly reduce its accuracy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For example, let's say an AI is being used to predict recidivism rates, right?
Okay.
We might need to sacrifice a bit of accuracy to ensure that the predictions aren't biased against certain groups.
Wow. Okay. So that's a tough call.
Yeah.
It seems like finding the right balance between those two things, fairness and accuracy, that's one of the biggest challenges in XAI.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, there aren't always clear metrics for evaluating fairness.
Oh, I see.
So Schneepat argues that this lack of standardization, it makes it really difficult to compare different AI models and ensure that they're meeting ethical standards.
Okay. So it sounds like we need more robust frameworks and guidelines to help, navigate all these ethical complexities. But let's move on to another challenge that Schneepat talks about.
Yeah.
The complexity of the AI models themselves, how does that impact explainability?
Yeah. So as AI models become more sophisticated, it just becomes increasingly difficult to explain how they work. Think about deep neural networks with millions of parameters. They operate in a way that's often opaque, even to the experts who designed them.
Right. So we're back to the black box problem.
Yeah.
Are tools like Lime and SHAP, are those even effective when you're dealing with these really, really complex models?
I mean, they can be helpful, but Schneepat points out that the explanations they provide are often approximations, right? They give us insights, but they might not capture the full complexity of the AI's decision-making process.
So even with these advanced XAI methods, there's still like a degree of uncertainty, a potential for misinterpretation.
Yeah, there's no magic bullet here, unfortunately.
And on top of that, I mean, some XAI techniques, they can be pretty computationally intensive, right?
They can. They require a lot of processing power, especially when you're dealing with large data sets. And, that can limit their practicality in real-world settings.
Right. It feels like every step forward in XAI kind of reveals new challenges. But I'm curious about something Schneepat touches on. The reliability of post hoc explanations.
Yes.
Can you explain what those are and why they might be problematic?
Yeah. So remember we were talking about the difference between inherently interpretable models and those that require explanations after the fact.
Right. Yeah.
So post hoc explanations, those are the ones that are generated after the AI has already made a prediction.
Okay. And the problem with that is,
well, Schneepat argues that these post hoc explanations, they can sometimes be misleading.
oh, okay.
They might not fully capture the nuances of the AI's reasoning, and that can lead to potential misinterpretations. And that's why some experts advocate for using inherently interpretable models whenever possible, especially in high-stakes scenarios.
Right. Like, if we're going to trust AI to make these really important decisions, we need to be confident that we understand its reasoning, not just a simplified explanation of it.
But before we, spiral into a dystopian nightmare about AI taking over the world, maybe we should talk about some potential solutions. Does he outline any strategies for making XAI more effective?
Oh, yeah, he does. And one of his key recommendations is to, integrate explainability into the AI development process from the very beginning. Make it a core design principle, not an afterthought.
So it's like baking explainability into the AI's DNA.
Exactly. And Schneepat, he highlights some helpful tools like InterpretML and Alibi Explain. These are tools that can actually assist developers in building more transparent AI systems.
Okay, that's good to know. So it sounds like there are resources out there to help address these challenges from a technical standpoint, but what about the human side of things? Yeah. So Schneepat, he stresses the importance of addressing stakeholder needs throughout the development process, right? So that means involving end users, internal teams, regulators, bringing everyone to the table.
Right. It's like we were saying earlier, right, about tailored explanations.
Yeah.
The doctor's needs are going to be different from a regulator's.
Exactly. And Schneepat, he also highlights the need for continuous monitoring and feedback, right? Mm-hmm. Explainability isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process.
So you're constantly evaluating, refining, making sure it's still working.
Exactly. Organizations need to gather feedback, audit their AI systems, and adapt their XAI methods accordingly.
Okay. So it's about creating this feedback loop to make sure that the explanations are actually serving their purpose and meeting the needs of everyone involved. That makes a lot of sense. But Schneepat also, he talks about finding this balance, right, between complexity and transparency. In fields like healthcare and finance, we're dealing with incredibly complex data and models. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we should just sacrifice transparency altogether.
Right. The goal is to make these systems as clear and understandable as possible without oversimplifying them.
Right. It's like finding that sweet spot where you can convey the essence of the AI's reasoning without getting bogged down in a bunch of technical jargon or oversimplifications.
Yeah, Schneepat, he actually uses a great analogy to describe this. He says transparency is like looking through a clear glass window, not a black box.
I like that.
Yeah. We should be able to see the factors that influence the AI's decisions, even if those decisions are based on, complex calculations.
That's a powerful image. Yeah. And it gets to the heart of what XAI is all about, right? Making AI more understandable and trustworthy. But Schneepat also, he reminds us that XAI is a constantly evolving field. What does he mean by that?
Well, he's basically saying that what works today might not be the best approach tomorrow. We need to stay agile and responsive to new challenges and emerging best practices.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. XAI requires this ongoing attention and adaptation.
Precisely. And that's what makes it such a fascinating field to be a part of, right? There's always something new to learn and explore as XAI continues to evolve. Speaking of exploring, are you ready to delve into the future of XAI?
Absolutely. Let's hear it. what does Schneepat envision for the road ahead? So we've talked about the challenges, but what about the future? What is Schneepat like? What does he see on the horizon for XAI?
Well, actually, he's pretty optimistic.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he sees a lot of exciting developments, driven by both like technological advancements, but also this growing demand for transparent AI.
Okay, so what are some of the like trends that he's highlighting? What can we expect to see in the coming years?
So one area he's particularly enthusiastic about is this idea of automatic explanation generation.
Automatic explanation generation.
Yeah, so like imagine AI models that can actually explain their decisions in real time, without the need for all those complex post hoc methods that we were talking about.
Okay, so no more like, struggling to interpret these cryptic outputs or having to rely on like a team of experts to translate what the AI is trying to tell us.
Exactly. I mean, Schneepat, he believes that this shift toward automatic explanation generation, this is going to be like a game changer for XAI. It's going to make it so much more accessible to everyone.
Okay, so automatic explanation generation, that's one prediction. What else does he see?
Another major advancement that he anticipates is this move towards like causal inference.
Causal inference.
So right now, a lot of the XAI methods, they focus on correlations, right? Like identifying which factors are associated with a particular outcome. But causal inference, that goes deeper.
So instead of just like identifying patterns, it's about understanding the underlying cause and effect relationships.
Exactly. And Schneepat argues that causal inference, this is going to be key to providing, more robust, more meaningful explanations. It's about understanding not just what happened, but why it happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the difference between knowing that you got a parking ticket and understanding why you got the ticket. Like maybe the signs were unclear or maybe you were in a rush and didn't see them. Causal inference helps you get to the root of the issue.
Exactly. And Schneepat believes that this shift towards causal inference, it's going to significantly enhance, the trustworthiness and the reliability of AI systems.
So we've got automatic explanations. We've got to move towards causal inference. It sounds like the future of XAI is all about making AI more transparent and understandable. Any other big trends on the horizon?
Well, Schneepat, he also predicts this growing emphasis on regulatory compliance and oversight.
Oh.
As AI becomes more prevalent, especially in critical sectors like healthcare and finance, we're likely to see, much stricter regulations requiring explainability.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We need some safeguards in place to make sure that AI is being used ethically and responsibly, especially when the stakes are so high.
Right. And Schneepat, he points to frameworks like the General Data Protection Regulation or GDPR as an example of this trend. And he believes that these regulations, they're actually going to drive further innovation in XAI, as organizations are kind of striving to meet those requirements while also maintaining user trust.
So it's not just about ethics anymore. It's becoming like a legal imperative in many contexts. But does Schneepat's like vision for XAI, does it go beyond regulations? Does he talk about any like broader societal implications?
Oh, he does. He really emphasizes the importance of addressing the ethical and social considerations of XAI. He believes that we need like standardized metrics and benchmarks to evaluate the quality and effectiveness of explanations.
Right. So as XAI gets more sophisticated, we need ways to kind of measure its performance and make sure that it's actually serving its intended purpose.
Exactly. And Schneepat, he calls for greater collaboration, between policymakers, researchers, and industry leaders to kind of establish those guidelines as best practices for ethical XAI development. He really envisions a future where AI is not only intelligent, but also transparent, accountable, and really aligned with human values.
That's a pretty powerful vision. It's inspiring to think about how XAI can shape a more equitable and trustworthy future for AI. This has been like a really fantastic deep dive into explainable AI or XAI. We've covered so much ground, from the basic principles to the potential applications and all the challenges that lie ahead. Before we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important takeaway is that XAI, it's not just a technical challenge, it's a human challenge. It's about bridging this gap between these powerful AI systems and the people whose lives are actually affected by those systems. XAI is about making AI understandable, accountable, and ultimately more trustworthy.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into explainable AI. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this complex and fascinating landscape. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about the future of AI. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a future where AI is not just intelligent, but also explainable.